Bonjour tout le monde, hello everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to be learning about qui, que, ou, and dont, which are relative pronouns. So what are relative pronouns? What do these do? So they're used to connect phrases and sentences in French. So their English equivalents are that, which, who, and whom, and where as well, in no particular order. And as I said, they're used to connect phrases and sentences. So on the left, you have a couple of examples in English. So there's the cat that you rescued, there's the dog which I like, and there's the man about whom you are speaking. So using that in English, so how do we use that or which in English? So there's two main reasons we would use that. So number one, to represent a subject, so the thing that's doing the action. So for example, the man that walks his dog every day is my neighbor. So you got two phrases in there. You have the man walks his dog every day, and then you also have the man is my neighbor. So you combine those two using that. And then you can also combine them with the word who. So for example, the man who walks his dog every day is my neighbor. And then secondly, we use that to represent a direct object, which is the first receiver of the action, the main receiver of an action. So we have Rachel eats the food that I bought. We also have Rachel eats the food which I bought. And then we also have Rachel eats the food I bought. So in there we have two phrases. We have Rachel eats the food, and then we also have I bought the food. So we're connecting those two phrases using that, which, and then in the very last one you'll notice that there isn't either that or which seems a little peculiar, but in English that, when it represents a direct object, is actually optional, so you don't actually have to include it, whereas when it's representing a subject, you do have to have it, otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. So qui and que in French. So to represent a subject, just as we just learned how to do in English, French uses qui. And then to represent a direct object, French uses que. So going back to the first part, qui. So l'homme qui achète le chien est mon voisin. So the man that or who buys the dog is my neighbor. So we use qui when we want to represent a subject. And then the second instance is Rachel mange la nourriture que j'achète. Rachel eats the food that I buy, Rachel eats the food which I buy, or Rachel eats the food I buy. So whenever that is optional in English, you would use que. But whenever it's not optional, you would use qui. So whenever que is in the middle of a sentence, it usually means that. You'll also recall that que, when it's at the beginning of a question, is a question word, so which means what. And unlike that in English, que can never be omitted. It always has to be in the sentence. Qui, which we just learned, represents subjects. It is usually found in the middle of a sentence, which means that or who when it's in the middle of a sentence. But if it's ever at the beginning of a question, just as we've already learned, it usually means who. And qui can mean that. It can also mean who. It usually means who when it represents a person, and it means that when it doesn't represent a person. And qui is not optional either. Qui is required. And then we also have dont, which is is a form of que. It's de plus que. So it also means that, or of which, or about which, or from which. So there's a bunch of different translations for that one. So we have les chiens sont des labradors. So the dogs are Labradors. And then we also have the sentence j'ai beaucoup de chiens. So if we combine them, then we would use dont. Les chiens dont j'ai besoin sont des labradors. So what we're doing here is we're saying les chiens de que j'ai besoin sont des labradors. But instead of saying de que, because that's not a phrase that we use in French, we would say dont. So we're combining them. But you'll notice that the expression beaucoup de ends in de. So rather than saying les chiens que j'ai beaucoup de sont des labradors, we need to put the de back at the front with que, and then we need to make a whole new word. Whereas in English, we would let the preposition sort of stay at the end of the sentence or at the end of the phrase, but in French, you're not allowed to do that. You actually have to make sure that the preposition isn't at the end of the sentence. And then we have où, which means where. Even when it's in a question, it still means where. So for example, In the middle of a sentence, we would see nous visitons la ville où elle habite. We're visiting the city where she lives. And then finally, this is what it would look like if it was in a question, as we've already learned. Où est-ce que tu habites? Where do you live? So just a couple of examples with them. Je mange le repas que vous me donnez. I eat the meal that you give me. Tu chantes la chanson qui est bonne. You sing the song that is good. L'homme qui parle est mon frère. The man who's speaking is my brother. And then finally, c'est l'hôpital où ma mère travaille. That's the hospital where my mother works. So I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section. Otherwise, please subscribe to my channel, which you can do so just below by clicking the red button and then signing into your Google Plus or YouTube account. And I would really appreciate it if you could do that. But I hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and à demain. Until tomorrow, au revoir.